All right, hello. Today I am here with Edmund Reinhardt, who works for IBM, and we're going to talk about Bob, the Better Object Builder, as I've also heard him refer to it as Bob the Builder. He, yeah, maybe too much creative freedom, but that's okay. So, Edmund, I'm really glad that we could do this together. I'm very thankful for that. So, why don't you introduce yourself? I mean, everyone probably already knows you, but why don't you introduce yourself anyway?
Sure. I'm Edmund Reinhardt, and I've been working in application development tools for over 30 years now for IBM. And this latest iteration is pretty cool. We're working on open source tools to build things in IFS stream files that work together with Git and the rest of the open source world. So that's why I'm here with the open source IBMI guru Liam, kicking things off.
What Edmund and I are going to do today is, well, first off, we're going to connect to a IBMI and we're going to go ahead and install Bob first off, but we are also going to clone one of the Bob demo repositories to make sure that we can get Bob to work on our system that we're using today. So as you can see here in front of me, I have VS Code open and I have a bunch of systems already set up. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect to one as you normally would. And when it's done connecting, what I can do is, well, actually, I probably should share my screen with Edmund so he can at least see what I'm going to do. So let me do that as well. That usually helps. Nonetheless, so I have VS Code open and I'm going to launch a paste terminal. So there's a button at the bottom of the editor down here that says terminals, and I can click it and I can choose 5250 or paste. And all we want is paste right now because, well, the very first thing that we're going to do together is install Bob because well, the way that you get it now is through the IBM Yum repository, which is really excellent because, I mean, maybe Edmund wants to tell us the old way of getting it if you like.
Well, back in the days, you had installed the open source environment via PTF, and there was about 3 pages worth of setting this and setting that. And then we got into an RPM build, which was just a couple of lines, and now it is 3 words. And Liam's going to show you the 3 magic abracadabra words to get Bob on your system.
Yeah, it really is magical. So, yeah, I'm from my paste shout, and of course we are assuming that everybody has Yum installed. I mean, it's been out for some years at this point, so we don't really talk about installing it anymore. But what I'm going to do is first off, is going to do a Yum list available. So what this will do is tell you everything that you can install from the IBM Yum repository. And of course I could grep it like I'm expecting Edmund to tell me, but I'm just going to search it in the terminal here. And I can see here bob.ppc64 is available for me to go ahead and install. So those magical 3 words are as follows: Yum, install, Bob. Isn't that excellent? Wow. And then from here we can just say yes, and it goes out and installs. It was really that simple, which is excellent. So following that, usually what I like to do is make sure it really is installed. And so the main command that gets provided is make I. So I can do make I-v, and it will tell me the version. And I'm guessing that's the latest version if that's the one on the repo. So that's good. Now, we have it installed. That's the very first thing. And luckily, Edmund provides us a fantastic example repository that we're going to use just to at least test it. I mean, that's usually the very first thing that you should do is test it. So, Edmund, while I pull up the example repository here, is there any chance that you could tell me why this repository even exists in the first place?
Well, we just we pulled out together an example of all the different type of source types that typically used in classic IBMI development, from ILE to OPM to, even CL and SQL, DDL. And we came with something that would support almost all modern application development requirements here in this little example.
And what I especially like about this repository is that, I mean, it's completely open source. So, not only has it got a ton of examples in it, but we're also going to use it to review some of the file structure that Bob provides as well in just a little bit. So what I've done is I'm going to take the SSH clone. I already have my SSH key set up and everything on the IBMI that I'm using, and I'm just going to clone it. So I'm in my home directory at the moment, and I'm simply going to do a git clone, and I'm going to paste the URL in like so, and that's going to run, and it will clone onto the IBMI that I'm working on, which is great. This is the best way to test it. Now, let's go ahead and CD into that repository. Let's have a look what we got. So we have all the standard stuff, all the traditional Q, RPGLE source, so on and so forth. We have a couple of additional files that we're going to take a look at too, but the first thing that I want to do is just run the make I command and see what it does. So traditionally, like everything else, it gives us the help information, if you like. And as you can see, we did make I-V, and that told us the version. But the important one that we need to at least kick things off is the build. And we can see down here, there are common make I commands. We have command build, or I guess B for short. Is that right, Edmund? We can just do make IB.
Yeah, we figured you do it a lot, so we made it nice and short, convenient.
Oh, okay. I like it short, so that's good. Okay, well, why don't we do that? Make IB.
Ah.
Okay, so it's complaining in nice red text. Isn't that such a treat? That we need lib1 defined as an environment variable. And so, Edmund, what would you say the recommended way to set that is? When using.
Well, you've got a bunch of different. So the reason why we did this, Liam, was because we wanted to have your project to be portable. So it's in Git, but of course you're going to compile in a different directory than I would, and I wanted to work in a CI/CD framework pipelines as well. So environment variables are a very handy way to do that. You could set that exporting an environment variable. You can, say lib1 equals mylib space, or you can say -e at the end of make I as well. So all three ways will work, whatever's convenient.
So why don't we just do it the traditional command line way? We won't export. We'll actually just attach it as part of the build. So in this case, lib1 must be defined in the environment variable. So let's do lib1 equals, and I guess this is where I can specify a library where I want all of the objects to be built in. Now, I think what I'm going to do, just for the sake of showing everybody how this will work, is I'm actually going to open 5250 here and create a new library specifically for.
Why don't you just do CL : create lib?
Like this?
Yeah. Or a CL space, I guess. Colon is the.
Oh, the bash built in. Yep. Yep, very nice. So let's do Bob demo. Wow, look at that. Beautiful. So then, in that case, yeah, that was great. So let's do lib1 equals Bob demo. And then let's do make I space. I could do B or I could do build. So let's do that.
You'll see that the first thing it did, it kind of generated a make file spanning all these subdirectories full of source. And we got a fair amount of source here because we're testing all these different types of source. And this is going to take a few minutes. But you're going to see in here DDS, you're going to see ILE RPG, you're going to see service programs being bound together because thankfully Bob understands how to bind things, in fact, multiple ways. You're going to even see things like building menus and building other things from CL. You're going to see UIM and also DDL. So all kinds of different sources are being managed here.
Yep, very cool. Now, I think what we'll do while this continues to build, I think we should at least look at some of the file structure that is part of the example, and specifically the two main files that I want to review is the iproj.json and the rules.make, because I think they're two very vital parts of a project that uses Bob to do a build. So why don't we start with iproj.json? This seems like the generic kind of project file. And so, Edwin, I'm wondering if you can tell us kind of what the purpose is behind this and how it can be used as part.
Right. So the vision, back in the days when Liam first joined the IBMI, he had this vision of a package manager for RPG. And so we're trying to continue in creating something like that. So this is like the package JSON of your project that you're creating. And what we see here is some things to set up the environment, because your environment is critical to how to build and how to run your application. You can set up your library list with some convenient things like curlib, or the most generic thing is you have an array of CL commands, so it could do anything, even setting your ASP if you like. And you'll also see that we have this ampersand lib1 syntax, so you can put variables in here, because typically you're going to want to compile things into a different directory depending what stage of the pipeline you're at or what developer you are. So we already seen how to set that environment variable. The objlib is where the things in this directory and any directory below it will go be compiled into. So you can override this at any directory level using a .ibmi-JSON. You can override objlib if you want, so that you can actually compile to multiple libraries, like a data library versus program library, etc. The other thing that's really interesting here is you've got something called include path. So that's saying that when we go to resolve includes, we're going to look in the qproto source directory. And so this is instructions both to the compilers, and we're going to set include path based on that, and to the tooling. So tooling like Merlin will respect that and say, I'm going to resolve includes when I'm doing my editing. I'm going to look in this directory. You could use absolute paths in here as well, QSys paths, IFS paths, but of course making it a relative path to your project makes your project self-contained and portable, which is pretty cool.
That is really neat. And I think something that I want to be clear about is this set ibmi environment command property here, which I think is really cool, because what this actually allows you to do is pass it, a bunch of CL commands basically before the build starts, which is great for maybe setting up an environment or changing system environment variables at the time. That's quite neat, actually, is a nice part of the build. It definitely simplifies the build, at least for those complicated steps.
And to make that
really
even
cool.
more powerful, those include paths and environment variable commands, they can also have variables, so you could customize them as well.
Right, and so you're saying that I could set an environment variable from my terminal, and then it would actually apply to the iproj.json file as it's being executed.
So you could say ampersand command in your environment command, and then set command to whatever you want, and it'll actually execute that command, right? Or
Wow.
it might be a parameter to your command. You can imagine.
Yeah.
Maybe
Wow,
you
that's
want to do a
pretty
clear
neat.
lib of lib1 or something like that.
Cool. All right, that's great. So the iproj is like the very first thing that we'd look at. But then I think more importantly is probably the rules file, because this actually tells Bob how to build the project, right? I think that's just as important to cover.
Right. So this is Bob. I didn't invent Bob. Jeff Berman did of S4I, and he was using the powerful GNU-make facility that's been available in Pace for a while. And what we've done is Makefile can be large and complex, and there's a number of rules that we've kind of encoded for you. And now, so what we've exposed is just a per directory little make snippet, only the things that you need to build. So right there, we're saying at the root, there's no actually source files here, but we're listing which subdirectories to look in to find more rules.makes to build together into a common makefile. This is the enhancement, is that the Bob can build things in multiple directories, and they can reference each other. So it's very powerful that way. And yet you only have to think about the one directory you're in right now.
Okay. So you're saying basically, if I look into one of these directories, and we'll just choose, qrpgle source, for example, inside of that is basically, its own rules file, which, look at that. So that has so each directory can have its own rules file that apply to sources inside of that, basically. So if I open that, okay, so I see.
Now you'll notice
Make
there's
this a little
two
bit
different
bigger.
types of things that we can build from RPGLE source, right? We can either build modules or programs. And here's something that's a little distinct about Bob, is that we want to make it unambiguous what object you're trying to create here. So any source that ends in just RPGLE or SQL RPGLE, we by default saying, you want to build a module because you're a modern ILE programmer. But if you say, no, I want to compile and bind in one step, then you need the extension should have .pgm or .pigm.rpgle,
Right.
and then we know, oh, you're trying to build a program. And to make things even more like, now we're having simple stream files encoding everything instead of having ILE, instead of IBMI objects, we have the text encoded after the name. So you see an art200 dash work with article. That's because work with article was the member text of that. So you can have whatever description you like, but we'll take the characters before the dash as the actual name of the target program or module.
Now, I like that a lot because, especially the extension part, because I mean, RPGLE, without looking at the code, generally you don't know if it's a module, a program, a service program. I mean, you have to look at it and understand. But I mean, since you're basically embedding the real output object type in the extension, I mean, you can tell from a glance what it actually is going to end up as, which is it's pleasant. I mean, it's good for Bob, but it's also good for the developer as well. I would say it's a nice addition. I like that a bunch. It's very nice.
Right. You'll see with ORD 700 also that we were including an RPGLE Inc. So that means header files. We want you to explicitly name them RPGLE Inc. so that we know they're not being built into modules. Right.
Yep.
Now
very cool.
I don't have to qualify that QProto source. Actually, that's probably a historical thing before I had the include path, right?
Right. So that was what I was going to ask. So you don't have to qualify it because you've already got it specified in the iProject JSON above it. Very cool. Okay, so that's very neat. Now I want to hold off for a sec. I want to check on how our build is going over here when it's finished. So that's very nice. So let's just close these for a moment.
Now, just one more thing while you're there. We already talked about iProj.json. What would happen if you said make I space info?
Well, let's try it out. Let's do make I space info.
Not implemented. Whoops. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. That's coming soon. So we'll be able to describe your project. Okay, Tom Kuhn.
Wow.
You misdirected me on that one. But yeah, there's a lot of cool things on Make I that are going to be have been implemented but we'll get to those later.
Right, and I know that in the video that we're going to do after this, we're going to look at more specific make I parameters. So I know that there's functionality to actually copy source members to the IFS. Like you actually ship, Bob with that functionality to make, or at least to help people move or transition into using Git much in a more simple way. I'm very excited to show that one off. Actually, when we do that, so
because we want to move everybody forward, because the fact we have things in a database format is makes sense historically, but it prevents us from accessing the rest of the world of open source things like Git that are very powerful, but only apply to stream files. So being able to get your source into that normal format opens up the world to you.
Yeah, it does. I'm so pumped to show that stuff off. Cool. So, okay, so we submitted the build and it ran, and it built 107 objects. So it says object 0 failed. So I guess that means, that everything compiled. 107 succeeded, as in 107 were built, and a total 107. So if something was to fail, Edmund, would it stop the build completely, or,
It behaves like make, where it goes as far as it can and until it can't build things anymore. But the other beauty of being like make is that now that you've built everything once, if you would say touch one of those source files, it would only build the things that it needs to, because it's like make. It knows that, I only need to rebuild this module and whatever this module bound into, etc. And probably the binding.
Shall we do that?
Example where before people had these big long CL scripts that they had to maintain that built everything, right? Unless they had paid big bucks for a good tool. But here you get this for free.
Okay, so why don't we try log 300? Is this a good one to try?
Why not?
All right, so let's do this. Let's say let's do, instead of user, let's change it to say user name. Wow. Very simple change. Okay, so now let's bring this over here, down here actually, and we have our terminal up here. Also, I just love the fact that you have all of this stuff in one view in VS Code. Makes me super pumped. So, are you suggesting that I could just run make I build again, and it would only build the stuff that's really changed and depended on?
Now, don't forget you have to set that environment variable, which is why it would have been handy to do an export.
Okay, well, let's do the export. Let's do export lib1 equals, and we did Bob demo. Very good. So now we have the export. Let's go ahead and do not make I info. We're not quite there yet. Let's do make I build, or B. I like that. Okay, so
It logged 300, RPG list changed, so we need to create RPG mod. And because we created the mod, we got to rebuild the service program. Because we created the service program, we got to rebuild the binding directory. And you see that, because we changed the binding directory, there's a few things that used it that need to be rebound, right? But it's
wow,
all and only the things that are impacted by that source change.
excellent. That was really cool, by the way. Very neat. Cool. That was very cool to see in action. Cool. I mean, that